Rabbi, welcome. Glad you guys are all here. Today we are on triennial, the ancient triennial Torah portion, VayisA Misham. Literally, then he pulled up stakes from there, meaning tent stakes. This is a word that developed into travel. When one would travel, they would pull up the tent stakes. Over time, it just came to mean travel. He traveled. But I think it's nice to know the nuanced original meaning of the word. And this picture that you see in the background, this is one of the tells, one of the mountains, well, hills really, not mountains, one of the hills that is in Gerar. This is the area of Gerar, so I just thought that would be interesting to have the picture there. So, and there's the reference where the image came from, BiblePlaces.com. The Torah portion today is Genesis, Bereshit, that's Bereshit chapter 20. And here we have our, this is a picture from the Masoretic, from the Masoretic text, it's 1,000-year-old document confirming that we do have a Torah portion here. Here's our big samech, meaning the sedra marker. And this is showing us in the ancient Masoretic that this is a Torah portion in that 3.5-year cycle that people practiced. And you can see, there it is, VayisA Misham, Avraham, right? So then Avraham pulled up stakes, or he traveled from there. Let's just go ahead and start with a quick prayer. Avimelekh, our Father, our King, modim anachnu lefanecha ha'ikir, anachnu yochalim lilmod hayom hazeh et toratecha. Bi Adonai tishlach na aleinu et ruach hakodesh Adonai, ki anachnu yochalim lirot tov mechashavti. לא לי ולך יהיה כל הכבוד אדוני, כי אתה גם זה אבינו. תודה לך בזכות ישוע המשיח. All right. Shabbat shalom to everybody. So here we are. So we continue with our Hebrew numerals. You can see the chapter marker here. And you should understand that the chapter markers and the verses were added later, right? This was not part of the original text to have a chapter and verse marking. This was something added just like a little less than 5 centuries ago to the text, the actual chapter and marker section, okay? But here we have a kaf, and that's the Hebrew numeral 20. And I'm going to colorize this guy. For those of you who haven't learned to read yet, this is going to be your Hebrew letter of the week, kaf. Kaf. So you see it looks kind of like a semicircle or something like this. It's if you think of it, if you take your hand and turn your hand sideways, you can make this shape with your hand. And that is what the word actually means. The kaf, it's the inside part of the hand. The inside part. That's the part that the ancients believed held guilt, if there was guilt. That's why King David in the Psalms says, I lift up kapai, I lift up my kafs to you, right? Showing that there's no guilt there. So there's your letter of the week. And the kaf, when it's written like this, it makes a kh sound. Ch. And if you put a dot inside of it, if we just put a little dot, then it makes a k sound. So ch and k. All right? So if you don't know your alphabet, please learn that letter this week. All right, so let's look at our first verse. And it says, VayisA Misham Avraham atza hanegev, vayeshev ben Kadesh uvein Shur, vayagar bigra. Okay. Then Avraham traveled from there, artza. So this is the hey at the end means towards the eretz, towards the land. That was HaNegev, the southern region, the hot, dry region. Vayeshiv, and he dwelled bein Kadesh uvein Shur, between Kadesh and between Shur. Vayagar bigra, and he sojourned, he stayed temporarily at Gerar. So, starting off the Torah portion, I have a question for you from Rabbi Abarbanel that I want to I wanted you to be thinking about. And this is kind of the theme of the drash, the main theme of the drash. So Abarbanel asks, why did Abraham journey from where he had been living comfortably and quietly among friends to Gerar, where evidently he was completely unknown? Right? And you can add to that, it's a dangerous place as well. At least Avraham thought it was. He had heard that it was. So that he has to resort back to his method in Egypt of protecting his life and Sarah. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Let's see if we can get the answer to that. So VayisA, he traveled. So this is Speiser comments, journeyed on. The text has from there, the Misham, which in the present context could only refer to Lot's cave. And I think this gives us part of the hint to the answer of why he left. Right? So Abarbanel is saying, look, Avraham had a great location, a great spot. He was doing well with his flocks, right? Lot had separated himself from him. Everything was going well. And now he decides to leave. So one thing that we might consider as Speiser confirms that it's referring to Lot's cave, Misham, so that Avraham had investigated what had happened, either through messengers or by himself with his nephew, whom he had taught righteousness to Lot, and he found out that there was incest going on. Until this time, Avraham, if you notice, he wanted to be near to Lot. He sent soldiers, right? Remember his 318 men from his own household to go save Lot, right? He did all of these things to try to cultivate in this younger man the fruitfulness of what Avraham had learned about Adonai. And now, finally, it's unbearable. Now there is abject incest. Lot has slept with his daughters. And some of you might say, but wait, the daughters, they made Lot drunk, right? They gave him drink. But the sages teach that from the pointing of the ta'amim, the pointing of the little accent marks, the grammatical markers, they say that although the text does say that when his daughter lay down from him the first time, he didn't know. But the little hints in the accent marks indicate that he was aware of her rising up, right? Which would then mean, why did he not safeguard himself the next night, right? Instead, he wantonly became intoxicated and had fornication with his daughter, with his second daughter. So there's a little bit to blame, the sages think, on Lot's part for this. It's not just his daughter's doings. Okay? So this apparently was too much for Avraham to bear. Whether it was that or possibly just being so near to where such loss of life had occurred. Remember, he could just go down and look down on the Kikar HaYarden, the round of the Jordan, and he could see the destruction, the smoldering. There probably would have been a smell if you think about all the loss of life that occurred there. And so it's not so unreasonable that such a wise person would want to, one, distance himself from the evil that enemies of Israel would now be formed, right? From the descendants of Lot. His daughters, each one would become the mother of a nation. And those nations, the Ammonites and the Moabites, they would end up being a big problem for our ancestors. So he distances himself from this, even to the point where he's going to an unknown area, an area which doesn't know him and where there is a bad reputation. Gersonides comments on Misham, from there Abraham journeyed from there. Either the destruction of the cities had caused a famine, or he was embarrassed at what Lot had done in the aftermath, or both. So this confirms what I'm saying about the embarrassment. What is this here? That he Vayeshiv, he dwelled Bein Kadesh, Uvein Shur, between these two cities. Remember, we learned before that Avraham had this pattern of choosing a location between two larger locations. Why? Sforno clears it up. Between two large cities, in order to have an opportunity to proclaim the holy name of God in both these cities, as he did later, the objective being to improve God's image among mankind, right? So always Avraham has in mind, when he pitches his tent, when he sets up camp for his hundreds of servants, his household, which is hundreds of people large by now, He's always thinking about ministering. He's always thinking about saving souls. And when it says to proclaim the name, this doesn't mean, hey everybody, yod hey, wow hey, yod hey, wow hey, yod hey, wow hey. I can see some saying this from my Hebrew roots associates. No, that's not what it means. In Hebrew, to proclaim God's name means to share who he is, to share of his mighty deeds, to share of his shame, his reputation. Okay. Any comments or questions before we move on? By the way, I apologize that last week's drash is not yet up. There's some audio problems I'm trying to overcome, so yeah, it's a bit delayed. Oh yeah, that's something I meant to make a calendar for you guys. I wanted to show you that we have a lot going on with the kehal even during the week, right? So, of course, we have at 10 a.m. on Shabbats, we have our elders. An elder shares a drash, right? And then we have at 4:30, supposed to be, people kind of come in when they're ready. I share my drash, right? And then on Sundays at 4:30 p.m., we have the Shemot 2 class, the Intermediate 2 class, where oftentimes we're in the text translating, so we allow auditors, if anybody wants to audit that, and just come in and see what's happening, right, without making too much of a ruckus to disturb the Hebrew teaching. You can pick up some stuff. Sometimes we talk about the sages there. Hold on, I got to mute. Somebody's got some tape. Whoever's taping something, please watch your microphone. You can come in, and we sometimes talk about the sages. We go into sometimes the next week's parsha. Sometimes we go further than we did in this week's parsha. And if you'd like to come in and audit, that's fine. You can come in at 4:30. And then on Monday nights at 9 p.m., we have a YouTube premiere where you can come in and watch the first third of one of the Shabbat Drashot that's been edited, and music's been added, and some other silliness added, and then we're all there in the chat, so we can chat about it live if you have thoughts or other questions. And then on Tuesday nights at 11:45 p.m., this is actually a closed class. We have a Tikkun Hebrew class, which benefits Tikkun Olam for students from around the world, from the States, from China, I think from Canada we have one, and from Malaysia, and from Singapore, and from the Philippines. So people learning biblical Hebrew. And then on Wednesdays at 2 p.m., we have the midweek Bible study led by Sister Annie. And that's the same, I think it's the same channels we have here, although they might be using a different link. Correct me in the chat if I'm wrong about that. And then on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m., we have, again, a premiere. We have one of these premieres on the Torah PH YouTube channel, usually around 30 minutes or so. And we chat about it live as it's going. And then Thursday nights at 9 p.m., we have a premiere. And then Friday's usually silent. Usually silent Friday night. But we might sometimes have something going on. So there's a lot going on. Maybe take note if you want to be more active in your learning with the community during the week. There's lots of stuff to do. Lots going on. So let's see. Dr. Vera comments that Avraham was aware of the incest. Yes. Yeah, he was. Word got out to him. Perhaps he went to visit Lot to make sure he's okay, or sent emissaries out searching for him. Yep. But he was aware, and then it's too much to bear. It was one thing when Lot went to live in Sodom, the city of ill repute, but now it's just gone too far. And it seems that Lot's daughters were affected by what had happened living around this type of people in Sodom. Remember last week I shared that in the Talmud it says that that his daughters were brazen. They were very brazen and outward in the way they would communicate with men. They were not modest. Even though they were virgins, they weren't modest. And so this is, you can kind of see they were picking this up clearly from their surroundings, from their environs. This is why it's so important for families to be careful to shield the children from whatever wickedness is going on the outside. If you have the capability to homeschool, that would be very good, or to send to a private school that, say, is not a Roman Catholic school, or one of these other any kind of method to shield the children in this day and age, I think, would be very wise. Dr. Vera says, my atheist classmate asked, who witnessed Lot's wife becoming salt? Well, for sure Hashem witnessed it and Lot witnessed it. Right? So who knows what the messengers might have said when they went out to meet Lot at the cave, right? When they found him in the cave. There are many events in the Bible where we don't know who witnessed the event, right? I mean, this is not a big gotcha. There's so many, I mean, goodness, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'ha'aretz. It's in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So who witnessed that? Right? I mean, I think that would be a bigger point maybe you could tell him. Like, rather, who witnessed Lot's wife becoming salt? I mean, it's not such a difficult issue for us. If you wanted to make an issue about witnesses, the very first verse, I think, is the big problem, don't you think? How do we know God spoke the world into being, right? Because he told his prophet Moses. And so many of these things were passed down from generation to generation in an oral tradition. And then when Moses wrote the Torah, God informed him more fully on certain issues. Tet says, it's written in Scripture, God wants things to be recorded always. Yeah, the important events are recorded, right? But much is left just tradition, just word-of-mouth tradition, right? Yeah, if he recorded every single thing, then there'd be more of an issue. Yeah. Okay. Is that okay, Doc? You like the answer? You know, it's... Tet says with stones as memorials, right? After Joshua crosses the river, right? What do? They set up stones as witness, as an aid, the Hebrew aid, a witness or like a testimony against us if we ever break faith with God, right? Remember they copied the book of Deuteronomy on many of those stones on whitewash. Interesting. Yeah, I like that perspective. Tet says the pillar of salt is also a memorial. It would be interesting to see if Moab has some kind of tradition in their writings, in their ancient writings about, their grandmother, right, the grandmother of Moab becoming salt. I would really like to know that if there's any kind of extra biblical tradition. That could be neat. Yeah, I'm not aware of any offhand, though. Sorry. Verse 2. Vayomer Avraham el Sarah ishto achoti hi vayishlach Avimelekh melech Raha. Oops, sorry. Vayikach et Sarah. Then Avraham said unto Sarah, his wife, my sister is she. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. So the text is pointed as unto. Now, let me see. I have a note about this. Let me see if it's first or not. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So this whole thing about saying that she's my sister, Qimchi comments that apparently Avraham had heard that the locals were bad people. Isaac said the same thing when he came to Gerar, and he did not say this in other places. So evidently, that's Isaac, evidently they considered the men of Gerar a bad lot. As for this plan of turning one's wife loose so as not to be under threat of being killed, we've explained in our comments to If the Egyptians See You in chapter 12, verse 12. It is surprising that Sarah's beauty could still have made her so desirable even at age 90. What was Sarah's secret? You might wonder. Although, just a notion, it could even be a bit beyond that. It might be deeper than just her being so beautiful, in that the wicked forces, they love perversion, right? The wicked spirits, they love perversion, right? Like we studied about the wicked angelic beings being perverse and wanting to sleep with human beings, right? Or possess men to sleep with them, right? Interfering somehow with sexual activities of humans is perverse, right? Surely you know that people who are godless, they're open to becoming more and more and more perverse in their lust, like we discussed. Oh, Dahmer. I couldn't remember his name the last time. Michael Dahmer, the guy who, the cannibal that was captured, who used to rape boys and eat them. Not just boys, adults too, but I think boys were his favorite. And yeah, just crazy. So the perverseness of the wicked spirits, it might be that Avraham was understanding. Maybe at 90, Sarah looked 50. I mean, we do have traditions that say she looked much, much younger. But it's not so necessary for her to be absolutely stunning at age 90 when you have perversity looming around. I mean, there are people out there that rape 90-year-olds. There's cases in the States where people have been prosecuted for raping 90-year-old seniors. So these things can happen. Ted says God renewed her cells. Yeah, possibly. What about stem cell therapy made up from antelopes or lambs? I don't know anything about that. Sorry. Outside of my scope. But what about this? Why would he say to Sarah? The text seems kind of odd. Then Avraham said unto Sarah, she is my sister. Oh, his wife. She is my sister. Why is he telling her that? Imagine he's walking along with Sarah, and the text literally has him turning his head to Sarah, and he says, she is my sister. See, this doesn't make sense. Unless Avraham is having a senior moment himself. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So, coming to the rescue, we have Ibn Ezra. Yay! Crotchety Ibn Ezra. So he explains that the word el in El Sarah should be rendered al, concerning. El is usually rendered to. Thus our phrase would ordinarily be translated, and Abraham said to Sarah, she is my sister. However, this makes no sense. And this is a comment on what Ibn Ezra is saying. Therefore, Ibn Ezra points out that al also has the meaning of concerning. So we just have to change the vowels. We don't have to change the consonantal text. For this child I prayed. For this child I prayed. 1 Samuel 1:27 is similar. If we translated el to mean to, this verse would read, to this child I prayed. This would be an impossible rendering. Right? So there we go. So we just change the little 3 dots underneath here, and we get al, and you can have this kind of a defective spelling of concerning. Vayishlach Avimelekh. Then Avimelekh, the Melech Gerar, the king of Gerar, sent Vaikach, and he took Ezra. Notice again, just like Pharaoh, we have this negotiated with her brother Avraham, said how much money would you like for her. None of this, what's the mechir, what's the bride price. He just took her. So on the name Avimelekh, Sarna comments that this is a fairly common ancient West Semitic personal name. It appears as Avimelekh in the Ugaritic texts, and as Avimelekh, king of Tyre, in the El Amarna correspondence. It also appears as an Israelite name that means my father is king. Right? You see, Avi, that's my father. Melech is king. We don't write the word is usually. Sometimes we use an emphatic pronoun, but that's it. Okay, any comments or questions on this slide? All right, let's continue on. Genesis chapter 20, verse 3. Vayavo Elohim el Avimelekh b'chalom ha'layla vayomer lo hinecha mehet aisha asher lakakta v'hi be'ulat ba'al. So vayavo Elohim el Avimelekh. Then God, Elohim, God or spiritual beings, right? It could be angels, could be spirits, came unto Avimelekh b'chalom halayla, in a dream of the night. Sforno comments, this visitation was of a similar kind to that reported with Lavan and Bilam, respectively. The Torah refrains from speaking about machazeh, a vision, in order not to place these wicked people on a pedestal similar to our patriarchs. The expression dibor, to describe a verbal communication to these individuals, is also absent, God having reserved such an expression for communications with prophets. as he pointed out to Miriam and Aharon in Numbers 12:6. Avimelekh did not experience a visual image of God in his dream at all. He perceived a divine voice only addressing him. And then we continue down, and he said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man, because of the woman whom you took." The Or HaChaim comments on this. You're going to die on account of the woman who you took. That's another way we can interpret it. The meaning is, after I reveal to you that she is married, you will be guilty of death. Had God not informed Avimelekh of Sarah's true status as a married woman, he would not have been guilty of death, even if he had slept with her. Any Gentile who sleeps with a woman whom he has reason to believe to be single is innocent of adultery. The woman, of course, is not. She knows she's married. Maimonides explains this in Hilchot Melachim 9, section 5. Dr. Vera asks, is Avimelekh a title like Pharaoh? That's a good question. No, it's actually a name. But that would make sense, wouldn't it? The prince would be called my father's king. And then maybe like the next prince could be called Avimelekh Avi. And then Avimelekh Avi Avi. It's a good question, though. Good question. All right, Genesis chapter 20, verse 4. Let's see, where are we? Okay. Avimelekh lo karav elaiv, but Avimelekh did not approach unto her. The Talmud Tractate Bava Kama, page 92, states, the Gemara answers, Rabbi Shemuel Bar Nachmani says that Rabbi Yonatan says, this is how the verse should be understood. Restore the wife of the man, this is coming up, in any case, since she is his wife, and with regard to that which you, Avimelekh, said, will you slay even the righteous nation, again, this is coming up, did he not say himself to me, she is my sister, and she herself said, he is my brother? The answer is that you, Avimelekh, are not so righteous, since the reason Avraham said that Sarah was his sister is that he is a prophet, and he already learned how to conduct himself based on your behavior. As with regard to a guest who comes to town, does one ask him about matters concerning eating and drinking, or does one ask him about matters concerning his wife? Does one ask a guest, is she your wife? Is she your sister? Avimelekh was to be blamed, since Avraham thought that he intended to steal his wife. And it's very interesting. The Torah text just tells us quite blankly that lakach, that he took her. Right? He took her. There's no concept of negotiating. But even if he had immediately negotiated to marry her, is this the way that foreigners should be treated? I mean, they come in with their families and immediately the local population wants to start marrying members of the household, rather than making sure that they have a good place to stay, making sure they're cared for, making sure some kind of hospitality, making sure that they understand where the markets are, this sort of stuff. This is the point that the Talmud is making, that Avimelekh, he's not interested. He just takes the woman, right? This guy is clearly a foreigner. Even if they didn't know who Avraham is, he is a foreigner. And to just act this way, you can imagine a situation where a foreign family comes into another land. Maybe they're fleeing famine, maybe they're fleeing the sword, and they're going to feel a little bit concerned, and they want to make the local population happy. So you can actually have a situation where a father even might be willing to give away his daughter in marriage to someone who asks, so as not to offend the local population. You see, there's always a nervousness for the foreigner in a strange land. There's always an unknown factor, not knowing the body language of the local population. Goodness, I remember, for those of you who don't live in the Philippines, Filipinos, sometimes they use their lips to point. It's very strange to a Westerner. So, like, I remember talking to somebody and they're pointing with their lips, and I'm thinking, this was at a mall or something originally, and they're pointing with their lips, and I'm thinking, huh? Like, what? It's very strange. Or every culture has their own type of body language. Like, some here do the eyebrows up, right? The eyebrows go up for yes, right? And for an American, you see the eyebrows go up, you could be thinking to yourself, are you going to answer me or not? I just asked you a question. What's with the eyebrows moving, right? Or you might be familiar with in the book of Proverbs that the wicked ones, they wink, right? They wink. They have these different signals to the other criminals to attack or to get that one over there. Or the Talmud even warns us about certain body language that can stand in the place of lashon hara, right? Instead of speaking evil against a person, they might just do a wink or a blink or a motion of the face, kind of like thinking they're getting out of lashon hara, evil speech, when really they're not. That also counts. So the Talmud levels the charge in the Gemara against Avimelekh. Yeah, you didn't touch her, but you still took her to your house. And even though Avraham is a prophet, not all the foreigners coming to your land are going to be prophets, right? They're not all going to have this kind of level of protection. And so this is not just governance. Even if he had tried to ask about the bride price and all this sort of thing, the foreigner is going to be wanting to make peace with the locals. And so he might be willing to marry off family members when he ordinarily would not be willing to. You see, this is the point. He's in a bad situation. Okay, let me see. There's some comments. Let's get this. Okay, so Dr. Vera shares with us Genesis chapter 26, 8 through verse 10. You can look in the chat if you want to see that. It's basically what happens with Isaac and his wife. Vayomer Adonai, then Adonai said, then he said, Adonai, my lords, Hagoy gam tzadik tacharog. So this is Avimelekh making this case. And it's kind of strange, the wording. Literally says, will a nation also? And then tzaddik here, it's not to be understood as righteous, I don't think. Tzaddik has a nuance in Hebrew. It's like in a court case, the tzaddik is the person who's in the right, okay? So say there's a lawsuit, and one person sues another. Whoever it is, whether the plaintiff or the defendant, the one who is correct, that's the tzaddik in the case. It can also just be the one who won the court case, even if it was unrighteous. If he shouldn't have won, but he won, he's also called the tzaddik, right? He's viewed as the right one, the just one, the one who's correct in the legal battle. So I think this is the nuance that's being used here. It's like, our case is just. He's making his case, right, before Hashem. He says this kind of people, the nation, and also he's talking about himself, Taharog, will you slay? And the idea is he's the king, right? He's the king of the nation. And so in the ancient Near Eastern world, there was oftentimes seen a connection between the king and the nation, that the king represented the nation to, quote, Elohim, the gods. In the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer 26:8, it says it considers that the angel Michael is the one who's speaking to Avimelekh, right? That he was sent there and he had a great angelic sword in his hand, and that this is with whom Avimelekh is discussing. So that's a traditional perspective.
Hey, this is the end of this part of Torah portion VayisA Misham. Experience our drash in 3 parts on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays as live premieres. Brought to you by the letter Kaf, always useful for making a K or Ch sound. Donations can be handled at the Patreon address on screen. Special thanks to Kehillah Simchat Hashem. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to receive updates with special drashot and information packets that we upload. Lo lanu, ladonai yike kol hakavod.